Hi guys, Rob here and welcome to South Florida Builds. This is my 2023 Saturn SD518 17-foot inflatable SIP. The reason why this video is important is because this boat has been marketed for 10 years as an 18-foot boat, but in fact it is a 17-foot boat. The tip-off to this was in the number designation in the name of the boat, 518. There's a lot of these boats out there, and whether they're from Saturn or Briss or any, they always have a number designation in the name. And that number designation relates specifically to centimeters. The reality is the whole world operates on the metric system except for us. We're the silly imperialists over here still using feet and yards. Bottom line is, the majority of inflatable boats are not purchased in the US. They're way more popular abroad, so they're going to lean more on the metric system on their measurements. I think it was genuinely just an innocent mistake. The boat's being, distributed and manufactured out of Korea, so, I think it was just a genuine mistake and it just never got cleared up. But if you notice with Saturn boats, they typically, with each model size, jump about a foot in length for the most part. So realistically, the last boat I had was a Saturn SD518, which is the model underneath this one, and that was 16 feet. So it makes sense. There are a few models when you get a little lower in the range that jump a half a foot, this and that. And again, always go to the number designation and do a calculation of centimeters to inches or to feet to see what the true length of the boat's going to be. I will say this though, this being the flagship boat, I know a lot of you might go, yeah, well, I don't want a 17-foot boat, I'm looking at a 14, I'm looking at a 15, and that's fine. You should know that all the SD range, from 14 feet all the way up to this 17-footer, are all going to be identical in width. The width measurements that we'll take today are going to be applicable all the way down to the 14-footer. Below the 14-footer, you come in, I think it's advertised a 13.8, and that has an air floor, and you go down to an 18-inch pontoon instead of a 20-inch pontoon. And the interior width, I think, is marketed as being 2.8 feet. Now, we can keep going into lamenting about all these different models and stuff, but we're going to work with this model today, and I want to jump right in and start getting some measurements. So I'm going to grab my measuring tape here, and let's start with total width. That, I think, will be the easiest here. 6.5 feet total width from edge to edge. That could vary, quite a bit depending on how much pressure you have in the tubes, but as I'm measuring it now, we're going to call that 6.5 feet. The next measurement we're going to do here is we're going to go for overall length. "17 feet on the money, just like described in the number designation, 518 centimeters, 16.99 feet, 17 feet. Let's talk about interior width. Now this was one I was really curious about because I wanted to start fabricating some parts, some interior stuff for this boat before I had it in my possession because it was on back order for so long. So I was like, I wish I could shop for stuff if I really knew the true dimensions of the interior width. Now Boats to Go has it listed as 3.3 feet, and if I were to consider that to be accurate, I probably could have shopped ahead of time. But considering I knew this was actually a 17-foot boat from some of the forums I had been on, and not truly an 18-foot boat, I didn't really trust the measurements. Now, from what they gave me at 3.3 feet to my calculation, that came out to 39 inches. Let's take a measurement. The first measurement I want to do is the actual floor width, just the metal floor, not the support braces, just where you could actually get your foot to in the corners here. "44 inches. So you have 44 inches of floor width on this bad boy. Now let's talk about the other important width, which is going to be the actual standing width in between the tubes with them fully inflated. They were right, 39 inches. 39 inches on the money. Now these aren't all the way up to pressure. They're fully inflated though. They're not just, they haven't been brought up to total pressure. I really don't think that interior width is going to change with a few more extra PSI of air in here. Let's talk about the bench width. 45.5. How about the depth of the bench? 7 3/4. Okay. Let's talk about another important measurement here, which is going to be the interior length. Let's see what the interior length of this boat is going to be. Put all that in the nose there. All right. 12 feet 7 inches. But you should note that there is going to be some loss for the tube depth, just like we lost some inches on the width from the front of the tube. So I think if you calculate for that, you are going to be right at what Boats to Go says, which is 12 linear feet of interior space. We know the tubes are 20 inches, and they are. How about when we're talking about storage? Like we already talked about the trailer in the last video. When we're talking about storage, I have a fold-away trailer tongue on this trailer, which allows me to push the boat all the way up towards the door, giving enough room for me to get behind it to get to our laundry devices here. But these suckers stick off pretty far. How far do these stick off the back to the transom? I am going to call that 31 to 31.5 inches. That's a pretty good chunk of tube there hanging off the back. How about the width? Because honestly, you could let enough air out of this sucker where you could push these down and put a bungee cord around them to hold them flat against here for storage, which you could do if you didn't want to do the folding trailer. But how far off the transom does the motor stick out? Now this, of course, is a Yamaha 25. Your mileage may vary on your motor, but 19.5 inches. And if you were to cock it to the side, how far does it stick off then? 18 inches. All right. Let's talk about the interior depth from the floor to the top of the tube. And that's another good one. You might want to build something that's flush, like the benches, to sit on, but more solid. I'm going to call that 18 inches, and that's not including this flap here that's holding your pull cord. How about the height from the floor to the top of the boat on the trailer? Some of you might have a storage shed or something with a low height. You might want to know that. Let's do that. Let's call it 44 inches. It's really 43, but because of the flap, let's call it 44 just to be on the safe side. 44 inches. Now, obviously, I have my trailer pitched way up in the front, but that's taken at the wheel. So this will be the pivot point. If you were to drop the front of the trailer down, that's the height you'd actually be dealing with. Let's see here. With the motor in the down position on the trailer, even with the nose tilted up, how high is the motor from the floor? 7 inches, and I'm pretty sure that if I tilted the nose down, we could get it around 17.5 to 8 inches. Let's tilt the motor up. See what that gives us. With the motor up and the motor canted to the side, we have 15 inches of clearance. Let's see, how about the transom height? Now I'm going to go from the middle here, the lowest point, 16 inches. And as we can see here, it kind of jukes up a little bit over here, so let's take the height there. 16.5. Now obviously we're seeing more than a ½ inch of lift here, but you have to remember the bottom of the transom is also V'd as well, so it's kind of following it up. I imagine they do that for a little extra splash protection along with how they put these flaps here. Transom width at the center of the tubes. 38.5 inches. All right, we're getting there. We're getting there. Hey, here's another interesting one I thought about. How much space in between the benches? 33. 33.5. That's something I wondered, because when you look at the pictures of the boats, they give you a top view on Boats to Go's website, which I think is a pretty well laid out website, I have to say. And I wondered, you're gaining an extra foot in length over the 16-footer that I had last. Do you also gain a little bit more real estate in between the benches, or are the benches the same distance apart and they just have a longer, goofier amount of space in front? I wish I had taken those measurements on the 16 so I could have comparative information for you, but there you go. At least you now know you have basically 33 inches in between the benches from here to here. How about to the back? 19 inches, we'll call that. And as this is kind of on an angle, the transom, let's call it 18 inches at the floor room from there. And I have a, what size is this? It's a pretty large. I think it's a 5-gallon fuel tank I have situated here, and the bulk of it is pretty much right behind the bench to the transom, and then the handle sticks a little underneath here. But it's completely basically under the bench to the rear. My battery will go over there, and you know, I haven't sorted out where and how I'm going to store the life vests yet that are required to be on board for every passenger. We're talking 6 life vests. They're kind of bulky. You do need Coast Guard regulated vests, so we'll figure out a space for those. Huh. What else? What else? What else? Hey, how about the trailer? We talked about the trailer in the last visit, but how about how it's sitting? The boat is sitting on the trailer right now. We had the 2 inner bunks, which were the bunks that came with the boat, and then we had the 2 outers that I added. Let's talk about the width of the 2 inner bunks that came with the trailer. They have to be sitting almost perfectly right under the outermost drain plugs. Let's take a measurement from the outside to the outside with 23 inches, and the width from inside to inside, 15 inches. The bunks themselves are 4 inches wide. They're 2x4s. And it seems to be supporting the transom very, very well in that position. What else do we have here? The outer bunks. I was concerned that the outer bunks were not going to be wide enough, not pushed out wide enough to be, I wanted them really to be under the center of the tubes. But we were stuck because I could only bring them out so wide because they were going to hit the fender on the trailer. And the other thing was that the brackets that you can buy for Continental trailers, or any trailers really off Amazon and stuff, they only come a certain height. So the height wasn't going to allow me to move them out any further. But as I'm seeing under here, they seem to be under the tubes pretty good. They're not perfectly centered under the middle of the tube like I'd like, but they are under the tubes, giving the tube support, and that's really the most important thing. You got support at the tubes, you got support under the main part of the boat and the transom, and that's where all your weight's at, and that's really what's important. Again, I did put a folding trailer tongue fold-away adapter or something, whatever you want to call it, on here. And I took that and put it 4 feet. 4 feet into the tongue is where I put that, so I could fold this sucker to the side. I actually still have another foot before this even touches the front of my garage. My garage is, I believe, 19.5 feet total depth to the step up here, and that gives me 18 inches behind the end of the cone to where that step up begins to get, you know, behind the boat, so I can wiggle in front of the boat and behind the boat with it in the garage. And believe it or not, you couldn't tell right now because my garage is an absolute mess, but I can actually get my car in next to this boat with it shifted all the way to the side here once I tidy this place up. Remember, I did just build a Boston Whaler in here not that long ago. Boston Whaler with a bad title. And that's how we ended up with this trailer, by the way. It's a funny story. I bought, it's called a dory. It's considered what they call a British Boston Whaler. And it was in pretty decent shape, but the whole thing did need to be redone. And I spent about 2 months rebuilding that boat. And this is entirely my fault. Rookie mistake. I spent the entire 2 months rebuilding the boat before going to get it registered and titled, and realizing that the title had been missigned. It was signed 1 extra time on the back in the dealer section, and apparently that made the title unprocessable. So no problem, just contact the person who sold me the boat, right? Oh yeah, they're answering messages and phone calls. So that, long story short, the boat was worthless. I ended up parting it out and getting all my money back at it, but it was a hell of a process because, you know, people on OfferUp and Marketplace are so reliable when they're calling you. Hey, is it available? Any rate, anybody who's ever sold anything on those things, you know what I'm talking about. The most critical part of that whole deal that I wanted to keep was the trailer. Because the way I figured it, this trailer was in great shape. It was the perfect size for an inflatable boat, which is going to be my backup boat. And this particular size trailer, believe it or not, is very hard to find, at least down here. Every trailer I would see for sale was either completely rotted out and shot, or way overpriced, or way too big or way too small. The Goldilocks zone on this trailer being 16, I think it's 16 and a half feet total length, on the metal frame anyways, not including the bunks. And the most critical part was that it was only 6 feet wide. All the other trailers I come across were either 7.5 feet wide or 8 feet wide. It had to be 6 feet wide, because I really wanted to be able to fit my car next to it in the garage, and to do that, that was the limit for me. Plus, I also have a little storage area on the side of my house that if I ever did want to store this outside, I wouldn't. But even if I did, it's 6 feet. So if anything happens with the boat where I want to put the boat in the water and want to put the trailer on the side of the house, I can do that now. So it is a particularly hard trailer to find. It's made by Continental. I know Rocket Trailers is another brand that people seem to like, that make aluminum trailers and such, but you know, by the time you buy the new trailer and pay their fees, all their hidden fees and their taxes and all that stuff, you're well over $2,000 on a trailer. So the way I figured it, this trailer used in the condition it was in was worth $1,000 to me, and that's the number I put on it. So I figure $1,000 on the trailer. I paid a hair over $2,000 on the boat. Again, I am in South Florida. I am local to Boats to Go, and I was able to go pick this boat up in person. And when I was there, I spoke to a gentleman named Caesar who runs the place down there for the owner. Very nice guy, very receptive. We discussed a lot of different features of the boat and things I'd like to see on future models, and they seem to be very receptive to my ideas. I believe the gentleman I usually correspond with via email, his name is Elliot. I'm not sure if he is the owner or not, but you know, hopefully you know, some of the things we discussed will come to fruition in the near future, because there's a lot of great attributes to these boats in their budget price range that I think would make them very, very competitive with a lot of the boats that will remain nameless that are literally 3 times the price. You could have 3 of these for what one 13-footer in that brand costs. Or brands, we should say, because there's a few of them that are very expensive. And I should also note that those boats are also PVC boats. So guys, I know this video was supposed to be about measurements, but I want to take a second here to kind of talk about something regarding these boats, the PVC fabric itself. Now, like we just said, there's a lot of other brands out there producing these boats that are PVC that are a lot more expensive, and everybody's going to have their opinions. Bottom line, PVC is PVC. No matter how thick or where it's produced, it's still susceptible to the big 3. The 3 main things that PVC material is susceptible to are the 3 things it's going to encounter as a boat: heat, humidity, UV rays. It's unavoidable. You're going to have a breakdown of the material. These are all petroleum-based products, and as they break down, just like sometimes you've got tools that have handles on it, get a little sticky, or those shelves in your closet start getting sticky. Once that process begins to happen and they start to break down, the oils start to rise to the surface. It breaks the bonds of anything glued. I know, oh, they're heat welded now. I know, every boat's heat welded now, including Saturn and all the other brands. Nobody's gluing boats anymore. Well, that's true. The tubes are now heat welded. But guess what? The pads that hold your seat benches on are not. They're still glued. The transom still needs to be glued to the tubes. These carry handles still need to be glued. I'm pretty sure this splash right here is still glued. The point is, there are still items that aren't critical items that could fail, with the exception of the transom, due to these factors, and will in time. If you get 3 years out of one of these boats using it, right, you're doing good. I know there's people out there, well, I've got 10 years out of my, okay, good for you. There's another brand that we won't name, that produces PVC boats, that I'm pretty sure all these brands, by the way, are manufactured in the same factory. It's a major company in South Korea that produces hundreds of these boats for many different manufacturers, and I have seen some pictures of other brands being produced right alongside Saturn's in the same factory in South Korea. That was like a year and a half ago. I wish I'd saved that picture. I'll see if I can hunt it down. Somebody, I'm sure, watching has that photo. Came from a forum. But PVC is PVC, guys. Now everybody's using, oh, they're using German PVC, and there's all these different brand names. Okay, well, guess what? Saturn's using German Hatex PVC now. Everybody's using German PVC now. Okay, one brand does it, they all follow suit. Bottom line is they're all still going to be susceptible. Briss will say, because they're very comparable to Saturn, that their material is thicker. Great, and for abrasion resistance, that might make a big difference for some people. But bottom line is, this is pretty tough stuff. And I'm here to tell you, being someone who owned a glued Saturn SD488 rather, that was the Korean PVC. Looking at this boat and looking at the material and material quality, it looks exactly the same. And that's to say, good. The quality on the Korean PVC looked just as good, was just as tough, just as strong. It was the glue that gave out eventually. This will last a little longer because heat welded seams, and because I'm being smarter this time around, I'm using the 303 Aerospace UV protectant and spraying the whole boat down after I wash it after every single use. That's also going to help. It's also being stored inflated this time, not rolled up in a corner getting dusty. But at any rate, PVC, I think it's all the same. If you're really concerned about getting something that's truly going to last, spend the big bucks and get a Hypalon boat, or a used Hypalon boat. I mean, apparently they're supposed to last 30 years. But, I mean, come on, $2,000? And just think about, all these companies keep making improvements every few years to their models. And from what I've talked to Caesar down at Boats to Go, they have some things planned down there as well. I might want a new boat every 2 to 3 years. This thing's going to get beat up. There's a guy who has one for sale down in Key West right now. This model, in fact, it's a 2020, and it looks like it's been ridden hard and put up wet. It's got 100 patches all under the nose of it and everything. It's seen a lot of use. And he claims he only has one slow leak, and it's a valve leak, and he has a replacement valve. It's also good to note that all of these boats, I don't see if you see it in here, all these boats come, I thought I had it right here somewhere, with a brand new complete replacement valve. And you can also order them from Boats to Go as well. So, yeah, if you want to spend 3 times as much for a very, comparable product, knock yourself out. Now, I know some of these brands come with a lot of gadgets and gizmos and all this other stuff, which also, by the way, is glued to the tubes, not heat welded. If you're going to use that stuff and you want all the bells and whistles, great. And let's face it, I live in South Florida, so I know this as good as anybody. There are some people with entirely too much money in this country. They just hemorrhage cash. $100 bills just fall out of their pockets as they stroll down the street. And they just want the best. Best of everything. Well, that's the best, so it's most expensive. It's got to be the best. And they're going to buy that. And if that's your deal, then knock yourself out. I don't mind buying a new boat every 2-3 years, and I bought this boat knowing damn well that I am going to buy a new one every 2-3 years, because that is the lifespan of this boat. It's an inexpensive boat. It's 17 feet. I mean, you could buy 3 17-footers for what one 13-footer that other brand costs. I mean, call me crazy. That seems out of line. Now, not to say, they do bring some great innovations to the table. There are boats out there with aluminum transoms. That's fantastic. It's weight savings more than anything else, and not a huge weight savings at that, but a considerable weight savings, enough that I would I'd like to see an aluminum transom on Saturn boats. The thing is, though, the PVC is not going to last long enough to, for the transom to start rotting out. It's just not. At least not in South Florida. Now, if you live in the Northwest, where some of these other manufacturers are based, I've never been to Washington State or Oregon, but I know it rains there a lot, and it's got to be overcast there a lot. The temperature is going to be a lot less abusive there. The humidity levels might be better. I don't know. And in that atmosphere, if you live in a place that's not as brutal as South Florida, you could very well get a lot longer out of your boat. But down here, 2 to 3 years, kids. And you just buy a new one. When it wears out, you buy a new one. And for me, again, I live local to Boats to Go. I just go pick it up, and it's a done deal. So that's all I wanted to say about that. I know this video was supposed to be about measurements. We kind of went off on a tangent there, but I thought it was important enough to mention about the PVC materials. I could go into more depth about how the clock runs on this material long before the boat's even made, much less before it reaches you. Just all I got to tell you is if the PVC is being produced now in Germany, all right, and the boat's being assembled in Korea, most of them are, just saying, and it's going to go on a container ship. right? In a container, it's going to be 100 degrees, right? And then it's got to spend about a month at sea, another month in customs maybe before it gets unloaded, goes to the factory. And it sits there for a while, probably in another unair-conditioned warehouse before it, becomes made into a boat. And then once it's made into a boat, it's boxed, puts in a room. It's also not air-conditioned, waiting for the rest of those boats to be built. Then when they're done, they go get loaded into another container, or another 2 months at sea and in customs, 100+ degrees, before they inevitably get sold and shipped to you in another unair-conditioned truck going across country. I'm just saying, this boat is exposed to a lot before it even reaches you, is all I'm saying. I will say this, though. I was very pleased when I picked this boat up from Boats to Go here in North Miami. Their warehouse is air-conditioned, so that's good on them. They're at least taking care of the boats once they reach them, making sure they're in climate control before they get shipped out to you. So that's a good tidbit of information for you. All right, guys, I'm going to end the video there. Again, next video, we're going to talk about customizations and seating and all the different stuff I'm working on here and sciencing out to make your life easier and give you guys more options on seating and different stuff for your boat. So until next time, I hope to see you there. If you like this video, please like and subscribe. If you have any questions or there are any measurements that I didn't take today that you would like to see that I forgot about, go ahead and leave a comment. We'll go ahead and take those measurements in the next video. We'll see you there, guys. Take care.